Well, this is Elaine Glover, and I am joined today by Marilyn Baker and also her friend Tracy. And we are going to talk about the book which Tracy has written, A Beautiful Tapestry, which is a tapestry of their life and stories and experiences. Before we start, can you share with us, Marilyn, how you communicate? You're obviously you're blind, you can't see anything, and also Tracy has virtually no hearing and is partially sighted. So at the moment we can't see, well, the listeners can't see you, but I think it'll be wonderful how you communicate.
Yes, well, actually, it's a wonderful thing, technology. We don't let our disabilities stop us from doing things, Trace and me. And so at the moment, I am typing for Tracy. She's in her office. We're using a wireless keyboard, a Bluetooth keyboard. She's got her iPad. She's looking at it. And I'm typing for her so that she knows what is happening. But we have other ways of communicating. Actually, when we're together, we can't just have a normal kind of quick conversation like when you're doing the cooking. So we have to sit down and make a definite point of talking to each other, you know, which really I think some people would find a bit strange. You know, you can't just be sort of spontaneous, as you might say, but God really helps us. And we've even got a different language we use sometimes, which is called the manual. It's a language on the hand. It's a sign language. It has to be on the hand, though, because Trace can't see enough to do it sort of normally in the air like sign language would be. So this is the deaf-blind sign language we use sometimes. And she also has an app on her phone, a new kind of app recently, Live Transcribe. And so this particular app will help her hear as I'm speaking now. She should be able to hear some of it coming up on her phone screen. That's quite exciting. Amazing. I mean, yes. Can you actually see that, Trace? Can you see what I've been saying?
Yes, I've been following Marilyn and watching the phone because it's hard for Marilyn to type and to speak at the same time. So when she's speaking, I've got my phone here near the speaker, and it picks up most of what she says, but with some strange, crazy words added in. Then
she calls it Chinese.
My hearing would make it relying on that.
I say she's got to have the gift of interpretation. I say she's got to have the gift of interpretation.
Yes. Well, it's amazing, really, because when I was 15, I went to Torch Trust for the Blind in Hallerton. And when I look back then to the technology now, there's no comparison, really, is there, in, you know, trying to help people with a disability to read and write. So for me to see this is amazing, and I'm really kind of in awe of it already. So let's start with you, Marilyn. The first part of the book talks about your life and what you've done. So can you share with the listeners how it was that you haven't got any sight, and a bit about your life growing up? And
yes, well, basically I was born with sight but premature. I say it's the only time I've ever been early. And I went, well, they put me in an oxygen tent really to keep me going, keep me alive. I choked on some milk, you see. And unfortunately they kept me in too long. Now, they didn't know in those days that keeping you in oxygen at a higher level than it should be would damage eyes. But a lot of children became blind round about this time. and they discovered it a bit too late to do anything for me. But so I've been totally blind all my life, and I went to a school when I was 5 for the blind and learnt to be kind of independent. But of course, to leave your home at 5, a boarding school, is very difficult, and to go to a boarding school. And so I felt very lonely. I felt cut off from my parents. And really this caused deep sadnesses in my life. And skipping along, when I was 11, my grandmother, I loved her very much, she became ill and eventually she died. And when I went to the other school, which was near London, a grammar school for the blind, I began to feel enormous loneliness and a real sense that my wonderful friend, my dear Nana, died. And I found a book in the school chapel. It was in Braille. It was called The Transforming Friendship. A beautiful title, I think. And then I began to read it, and I had such a hunger inside, is the only way I can put it. A longing to know if this Jesus that they were talking about was real. And I thought, if he is, it's the most wonderful friendship that any of us could have. And then Billy Graham came to Britain round about this time, and I went to a crusade, not with him, but with one of his sort of workers. And it seemed all my questions were answered. And I just one day at the school, I just said, Lord, I want you to rescue me. I want to be saved. I want to come into your Father arms. And that's exactly what happened for me, and I've had ups and downs since, but that's how my relationship with Jesus, my very best friend, started.
I was just having a glimpse in the book this morning, and you mentioned, or it was mentioned, that you felt that your father, you always wanted him to say well done, but he always never seemed to be satisfied, and that sort of really hurt you.
Yes, that's true. I mean, the thing is that he had lots of problems himself. He was abandoned as a child, but I think they had deep disappointment when they found out that I was going to be blind. They found out later, you see, not when I was first born. So it came as a dreadful shock.
Yes, and I wonder if it was guilt, though. Do you think there was a part of guilt in all of that?
Yes, I think he felt guilty that he'd brought somebody into the world that had a disability. And I think, you know, he was so afraid for me. I think this is the point. Fear governed his life. And he so wanted me to do well. He didn't want me to go through the things that he'd been through. So he overprotected me, and he tried to stop anything bad from happening. And so, in a way, he was always goading me on to do better. Even when I thought I'd done quite well, he'd say, oh, well, you know, you could do better than that. He used to say, you can do better. If you don't do better than the average sighted person, you'll get nowhere. Now, I understand why he said that, but of course it made me feel a deep sense that he was disappointed in me.
Yes. Well,
and your spirit picks that up, even if your mind doesn't. As a child, you can feel an atmosphere around you that somehow you're not enough.
So how was it your faith that helped you combat how you felt with that?
Yeah, well,
in the sense that you have a father who loves you.
Exactly. Well, you see, this is the point. When I came to be a Christian, I suddenly began to understand that my Heavenly Father was so different. You know, he affirms us right from the outset. He says underneath are the everlasting arms. And, you know, he's forgiven us. He's already done everything so that it doesn't depend on our performance. You see, everything depended on my performance as far as Dad was concerned. But with Jesus, it doesn't. His love doesn't change whether we do well or whether we don't, actually. And we need to drink in daily his approval. I also realised, because Dad was a very strict person, he had, you know, strong authority in his life. And I realised that my Heavenly Father, although, of course, he is Lord of all, that his authority is gentle. And there's a lovely saying where it says, there is nothing so strong as gentleness, and nothing so gentle as true strength. And I think there's something very wonderful about that. I've learnt to understand that my Heavenly Father, he gives me true freedom, and he's always there waiting to encourage me. And it's something I've had to learn to grow into. I've had prayer to help me as well, to get free from difficulties and sadnesses. And God has really transformed my life. And so I want to pass on that kind of encouragement and hope and deep affirmation to others.
And as you how can I say, as you've grown in your faith, has that relationship with your father, or I don't know whether he's still here, whether
No, he
not.
died.
But did you ever have a better relationship with him as time went on? Did he ever say to you, well done in the end with all what you've done?
In the end, you see, when I gave up my teaching job and I went into full-time Christian music ministry, at first he was dead against it. And he said I was a fool to give up my teaching job and I'd regret it and all that. But 2 years later, when he realised that, well, I was going abroad and things seemed to be going well for me, he changed his mind and he said, I'm glad you made that decision. That was quite a big turnaround for him. Yes, bit by bit it got better. But to be honest, I prayed a lot for him, before he died. And I know he came to know the Lord, actually. That's a longer story and it's in the book, so you can read it. But the amazing thing is that at the end of that, I remember having a deep sense of sadness that he'd gone, of course, but also a kind of revelation came to me that he was with the Lord and that the Lord and him were standing together. And I felt as if he was saying to me, now I know what it means to belong to our Heavenly Father, and I'm giving him full permission to kind of look after you now. And I'm proud that you're my daughter. I felt as if he said that to me, I'm proud that you are my daughter. And that was something so amazing. I never heard it in the flesh, but now when I know that I'm going to meet him face to face, I feel that he's going to really mean it and say it.
Yes, so that must be a great healing in that.
A very great healing sense.
Yes.
You see, God heals us along the way as we deepen our relationship with him.
Now, moving on, can you share with us from being in college, or was it Chorleywood?
I went to Chorleywood. That was the grammar school for the blind. Yes.
Yes, but then you became a teacher, didn't you, in later years? Can you share with us how you became a teacher, what you experienced?
Well, you see, I went to the Royal College of Music.
Yes.
I was the only blind student there at the time, and I was an oboe player primarily. And then I left the school, and I had a job opportunity to work in Watford to become a sort of, they call it peripatetic teaching. So I went round to different schools and I had a guide dog. It was a lovely time in my life. And, I enjoyed teaching the pupils. And I also went back to the school for the blind, Chorleywood, to teach there, which was quite a challenge because I'd felt some difficulties while I was there as a pupil. And I really wanted to convey to the students that they were very, very valued, actually, by God himself, and I think quite a few did become Christians. I used to pray for them a lot.
Yes. And how did they react to you? Did you have a good relationship with most of the students?
Well, at the Royal College of Music I did, they were amazing. The Christian Fellowship kind of took my life over, in a sense, not really took it over, but they understood that I needed help. And so the Christian Union at the college, all the friends there really got involved with me. And it was through meeting a girl in the Christian Union group called Lou Hales, and that was her name at the time, that I actually got involved with writing songs, because she wrote the most beautiful but modern Christian songs. And so I listened to them and they used to make me cry. And she said, have you ever given God your musical gift? And I thought, I haven't really. So I gave him, as it were, I dedicated what I had to him, and I asked him if he would help me write things that could really influence people's lives and hearts. And he did. That's when it all started.
Well, am I right in saying that this is you wrote a poem, or whether you made it into a song, was "Rest in my love, relax in my care. I know that my presence will always be there. You are my child, I care for you. There's nothing my love and my power can't do." That is very beautiful. So, when did you write your very first song?
I wrote it when I was at the Royal College of Music, actually.
Yes.
It was because we used to go round and sing to youth groups. The college did, the college Christian Union. But I always used to think, we used to do oratorios and classical pieces, and I thought, well, I think some of these kids could do with something a bit more jazzed up. So I remember praying very much that God would give me a sort of song that we could do, and I started thinking of one, and I wrote, "He's my Saviour, my friend and my Lord," and so I did write that, and my college friends sang it with me and clapped along and everything, and it was really good fun, and that was my first song, but I didn't write anything else after that for a long time.
Did you have any people that you looked up to as a child within music, or
Well, of course, I loved the oboe because I was an oboist, so I used to listen to a classical oboist called Léon Goussens. And then this girl that was a wonderful songwriter, when I met her at the Royal College of Music, I felt that she was amazing, and I knew that she let the Holy Spirit use her. But I was always really a classical musician, and so I used to love listening to concerts. And of course, because I was at the Royal College of Music, we used to go to the proms and things like that.
Oh, wow. So, was it when you first went to the Royal College? Were you a bit daunted, or did you just
very daunted? I mean, for a start, I'd never been outside of a blind community. My two schools that I'd been to were with blind students. I'd never really mixed with that many sighted people that were my peers, because I didn't have any brothers and sisters. So, I had to learn my way from the hostel where I was living in busy London. I had to learn my way to the college, and that was really very challenging for me. I had a little white stick, and one day I even got knocked down by a car.
Oh dear.
And that really frightened me. It nearly put me off from travelling. But in the end, I got quite used to it, and I would even travel on the tubes on my own and things like that.
You probably had a better amount of confidence than some sighted people, because going on the underground is very daunting, isn't it, when it's very busy?
Well, it was rather daunting, but I found it all quite an adventure to travel, really, in that way, once I'd got used to it, because it was like independence. I'd never had it. My parents were very protective, and I sort of think they tried to stop me from, they wanted to keep me safe. So, well, I used to travel quite a lot on the underground and enjoy it, and I had lots of fun. My student days were very good fun indeed.
Yes. So, we'll park that up a little bit. So let's talk about Tracy. Tracy, can you share with us about your early life and about your disability, how you lost your hearing?
Right, yes. Well, I was born into a lovely family and was brought up in London. Quite a working class family, if you like, but I'd always been in London and always well at the beginning. But then when I was about 2, my sister developed measles and then passed it on to me, and I became quite ill. And one night, when I was actually thought to be getting better, I had this really terrible headache that went on all night. And then my mum came in the next morning. I'd gone all floppy and had no strength in any of my limbs. And I was rushed to hospital, and it was thought that I had polio.
Oh,
because
dear.
it was in the 60s, and it was when there was a polio epidemic. But it wasn't polio, actually. It was encephalitis that was caused by the measles and high fever. And And so I was in hospital for quite a long time, and it affected my balance, my coordination. I was sort of paralysed for quite a while. And it badly affected my hearing, but that wasn't actually discovered until I was 12. The reason is that it was a neurological damage rather than damage to the ears. And so I could still hear sound. But what no one knew, and I didn't know either because I was too young, was that the sound had all become muddled. It was just like a kind of cacophony. And I couldn't understand it, any words particularly. But I could still hear the sound, so in any hearing tests that I did have, I was responding, and no one knew that I was deaf. And so it did cause problems because it meant that when I eventually started school, I had visual problems and I had a big patch on one eye because of astigmatism. And that made me a target for bullies a bit. And then there was this sense that I never responded to teachers. And no one knew why. So I was thought to be slow learning. Added to that the fact that I walked in a strange way. I was called twist leg. And kids would follow me around the playground chanting twist leg and four eyes and things like that. And so school was very difficult, really. And even when I was eventually diagnosed as being deaf, when I was in junior high school by then. But by then it was a streamed system. And I wasn't expected to do well. So when I got into the upper levels of school, I was still expected to do really poorly and was put in all the lowest groups, aiming to do CSEs and get the lowest grades in them. It was before GCSEs. But God helped me, although I didn't know God at that point at all, but I believe he was helping me looking back. And I got CSE grade 1s in all my subjects but one. So I did manage to get onto the course to do A-levels.
That was amazing.
So that was what happened, really.
I was reading a little bit about when you went into the Waxworks Museum and there was you felt a hand come out the coffin, and I thought that was quite funny. And you wrote it in the book.
Yes, well, those were happy memories, if you like. There were many happy things because it was actually a very loving family. But we went to the Isle of Wight every year. It was my dad's favourite place. And this was the Waxworks Museum in Brading. Maybe some of you will remember it. And this was a part of the museum called the Chapel of Rest. And so they had a skeleton playing the organ with this eerie music, which I could hear at that time, because then my hearing was more like hard of hearing. Now I am severely to profoundly deaf, but then I could hear this eerie music. And there was a coffin in the middle of the room, and the lid rose up, and a skeletal hand came out. And I screamed and ran out of the museum, thinking that the spirits was going to come and get me. I had a lot of imagination, and so...
Another thing that reading in the book that when you were teenagers, you both experienced a healing, and also that healing through the brokenness that you both had helped you to understand other people.
Yes. Well, I mean, there were some deep things in my life apart from the illness that made me deaf. My father, who had left the Isle of Wight, began to become ill. He had cancer, and although the doctor thought that he might have a couple of years, he actually died very quickly. So he died when I was 7, and that was a huge blow in the family. And then later on, there were other things. I had a stepfather. And a lot of struggle at home through my stepfather and abusive situations. But amazingly, after I became a Christian at 19, when I was at college studying for a degree, and I became a Christian there, and God started to do an amazing healing work in my life. I began to hear his voice, and he began to speak to me through his word and through creation. And people also began to pray with me. And the different things like the teasing at school, and especially the verbal abuse from my stepfather, constantly being told that I was rubbish, and things like that, it deeply scarred me. But as people prayed and as I began to hear God speaking to me, that I was, for example, beautiful in his eyes, he showed me that when I was looking at a beautiful part of creation. But then I heard his voice speaking to me and saying that you are much more beautiful to me than any of this. And it was staggering to hear those words. And through different things like that, a very deep level of healing began to come. It's still ongoing now, if different things come up. But I'm amazingly changed now to what I was then, in my early years of being a Christian.
Yes, I think our passion, if you like, is to see people's lives brought into greater and greater wholeness. Which is why now, because we run conferences online and things like that, we do offer prayer appointments with people online on Zoom. It's a new thing really to be able to do it, but you know, the Holy Spirit can work through the airwaves.
We can.
And it's really wonderful to know that people can be brought into a deeper level of God's security, because especially with all this lockdown and stuff, I think a lot of things are brought to the surface with people, fears and anxieties, and it's an amazing time when, you know, God doesn't shame us or kind of expose us, things that are bad just to shame us or anything. He loves to help us. He loves to help us know him more, and that's what we love to do, help people to get into that intimate place with him.
Well, can you share with us, Marilyn, how you got together, how you met?
Well, actually, in a way, it's a joint story, you see. So perhaps Tracy should start it off. I mean, I was travelling around doing singing and doing concerts, and how did it first... You say the first bit, Trace. What happened?
Yeah, okay, well, I was actually at Trollywood College. At this point, I was working there as a volunteer. And because I felt that God was leading me to become what was called a technical officer for the blind. And I needed to get practical experience with blind people before I went to do the course. But while I was at that school, this blind lady came in to take the Christian fellowship there. And she was blind herself, and she was lovely. I chatted to her after the girls left. And she said, I live with Marilyn Baker. Would you like to come and have a meal? And so that was an amazing thing, to be invited out. I'd not long finished being a student. So I said yes, and I went for this meal. And I'd actually been, I actually went twice. The first time it was just Penny, because Marilyn was away. And I was really late because I got lost.
Oh dear.
The second time was when Marilyn was going to be there, but by then I knew where she lived. So anyway, when I got there, I was really nervous because I was still really shy as a person. And I thought Marilyn's going to be so spiritual. She's a gospel singer and she wants to talk about God all evening. And I'd been a Christian about a year, and I didn't know how to talk about God all evening. So all the way there, I'd practiced saying things that I could think of about God for a whole evening. But then I knocked on the door, and it was Penny that answered, and she said, "Oh, come in, Tracy, make yourself at home. Marilyn's not quite ready." And so I went in and took my coat off. And then there was a noise, and I looked up the stairs and saw Marilyn coming down. And she looked like something out of a horror film. She was wearing a dressing gown, and it was covered in red, and I thought it was blood. And she had blood pouring down her face. And I was a bit phobic about blood, so I was panicking rather. But when she got to the bottom of the stairs, she held out her hand and she was smiling. And I thought, well, how can she smile? She must be in a lot of pain. But then I saw she had a bag on her head.
Yes.
And I thought, if you've injured yourself, you don't put a bag on your head. And it was only then that I clicked that it wasn't an injury, but she dyed her hair. And it was dye that was pouring down her face and over her clothes.
Well, let me just say the rest of it now, because the point is that, I had thought she was going to be late because Penny had said she was going to be late, and probably because she was late the first time. So I still thought I had time to dye my hair, and I put henna on it. And then, of course, when the doorbell rang, I thought, gosh, what am I going to do? Shall I stay upstairs and not appear? Or shall I come down and look a mess? And to be honest, I thought, well, I'll just come down and be done with it, because I thought I was going to meet her quite formally. But anyway,
Yes.
I came downstairs and she was shocked, and we had a good laugh when she suddenly realised, and I laughed, and we went into the lounge and we didn't stop laughing. In fact, we talked for ages, and then I screamed. I said, gosh, I was meant to get this henna stuff off. So she said, oh, let me help you, let me help you. So we went upstairs, and my bathroom was all covered in henna. Everything was in a mess, really. In fact, I had a previous assistant. She said, never dye your hair on your own. And that's like red rag to a bull. I thought, I will. Anyway, so Trace, instead of talking all about God, she was scraping, dye off everything and helping me sort out. And we had such a laugh and a lovely meal with Pen. And after that, to be honest, we became extremely good friends. I'm not sure if we ever would have done if we'd met more formally and had been just a normal meeting, but we had such a laugh and such fun and like an adventure that it kind of joined us together, and then we couldn't stop wanting to see each other. She'd come round often and give us a hand. And
I bet poor Tracy though at the beginning.
Poor Trace.
Poor Trace.
At the beginning, yeah. I think she wondered. And such a shock, for her. But, really, it was good fun. And I never even thought much about how people looked at me, really. I just used to think, let's welcome the person. I was more
Even if you were covered in henna.
It didn't bother me. I just thought, there you are. She's a lovely lady. I also used to have a friend who was deaf, and she was a lovely lady, and we were like sisters. So the thought of meeting, she died, you see, that one. So I thought, well, the thought of meeting another lady who was so deaf and perhaps having difficulties with hearing, it didn't daunt me at all. I felt excited.
That's wonderful. So, how did you, as you were becoming friends, did God use both of you to bring healing in your lives with your friendship?
Well, you see, I was travelling around, and the thing was that my assistant, who was working with me at the time, decided she needed to leave because we did a lot of travelling, and I just couldn't find anyone else to take her place. And I said to Trace, knowing that Trace was deaf and avoided public occasions, I thought, it wouldn't be Trace really, would it? But however, I said to her, I can't find anybody. I don't know what to do. Would you like to come with me just occasionally to concerts and help me, like pack my case, do ironing for me, make sure I look nice on the occasion? And so we did our first concert together. She came with me, and I remember saying, I've got such a long programme to do. Do you think you could speak? Do you think you could give your testimony? Well, Trace was really shocked about that because you had never spoken in public, had you, Trace?
No. I mean, I was very shy, partly because of my background and partly because of never being able to hear anyone. So I definitely thought of myself as a background person. I'd never spoken in public apart from an extremely brief with a Christian. But now Marilyn was wanting me to share my story and to share a little thoughts. And this very first event we went to, and I was so shocked. When she initially asked me, I thought she just wanted me to help her find the right clothes and make sure her case was packed okay. But I was going to refuse to share anything. But I felt this kind of yes inside that I should. And so I did, but on that very first occasion, it was an amazing thing because I just didn't know what to share. I mean, if you think about it too, as a deaf person, I'd never heard a testimony either. So I didn't know how people did it. I'd got no kind of exposure to it at all. But when Marilyn called me to go up, I was literally shaken and I thought, I just can't do this. Everyone's looking at me. I'd had so many years of being told that I was rubbish and to stand in front of masses of people and all eyes on me. I just couldn't. But I said, God, please help me. And as soon as I got up to the mic, I felt this stillness come over me. And it was as if he was standing right alongside me. And I felt a peace. And I started to speak. And it was as if I went from not knowing at all how to do it. As if a fluency just came. And I was able to share the healing journey that God had taken me on. Some of the things of the past. The way he was bringing peace into the present and setting me free. And it was just amazing. And I began to make eye contact with the people and realised that people were being touched. And I suddenly felt this amazing sense of love for them. Yeah, Marilyn wants me to stop.
Yes,
Okay.
well, the thing was, you could have heard a pin drop. It was so silent, and Trace became more and more fluent. It was absolutely amazing. She shared about her life, how God had stepped in to heal her. And do you know, it was so amazing. At the end, I think it was 12 people rededicated their lives to the Lord, and 8 became Christians. And I sang my song after she'd spoke. He gives joy to the hopeless, peace to the weary, and he binds up the broken-hearted. And it was after I heard her testimony and realised that she had an amazing gift, even though she'd never felt she had, of public speaking. And I thought she shouldn't be wasting her time on thinking about being a social worker. She should be out there telling her story.
And then there was no stopping her really after that, was there?
No stopping her at all.
No. So what I'd like to ask you both is, how did you come about writing Beautiful Tapestry? And were you surprised how it all came together?
Sharon's first.
Yeah.
I had done a previous book with Authentic, the publisher, and I was wondering about what would happen next. But one day Marilyn had a letter from Authentic asking if she would consider writing her memoir for them. And Marilyn was a bit panicky, wasn't you? Because Marilyn feels that she cannot write in that sense of writing a book. Although she does actually have a lovely writing gift in many ways. But not for a book, she didn't feel. So then we put our heads together and came up with the idea. An idea of actually which we'd often batted around but never really seriously thought we could do before. And to write our story together. and for it to include Marilyn's background and my background. So for it to be like a kind of joint memoir, but focusing on what happened after we came together and the different things that God had enabled us to do as a blind person and a deaf person. So we put that idea to Authentic, and amazingly they jumped at it. So over to Marilyn now.
That's true. Well, you see, the thing was that an awful lot happened. We've been in ministry over, well, I don't know, 30 odd years now, really. It sounds a long time, but you can't fit in one book everything that happened.
No.
And so it was really very difficult to decide what to put in the book, but Trace was amazing. She decided we wouldn't just do it chronologically, we'd try to put it in themes as well. And we decided to be dead real, to tell the good and the bad, the ups and the downs. People have said when they've read it that they love the fact that they feel like really laughing at times because there's some very funny things, and crying. There's all kinds of things and emotions run through it. But
J. John gave you what did he say? He says you've two remarkable women who, despite severe difficulties, have blessed thousands, 10,000s of people, including faith, endurance, and God who can be trusted. So both of you are a living testimony of what God can do with what man will put aside. God loves, uses, restores, and is beautiful. So this book is didn't you? It was 2 Colossians 2 or something. I remember just 2 Colossians 2, that God is constantly weaving, isn't he, in your lives and testimony and.
Yes, I think the fact is that God uses people who are weak. This is the whole thing. When we feel all strong and able, we're not so strong as we think, but we often feel very weak, very inadequate. We often think, well, gosh, what are we going to do now? How are we going to do it? And we put that kind of thing in the book, we explain. But then we realise that God steps in, he helps us, and he also provides other people alongside us, the right people, prayerful people, people that will give us special help and assistance that we need. We have a friend, for instance, who types a great deal for Tracy in conferences, because obviously if I'm speaking I can't type, and there's this lady who does a great deal of it, and she says it's her ministry. She's really, really fast. And then, we have drivers and people that take us in the van to places, of course, when lockdown's over. And we have been quite encouraged that we've been able to run conferences on Zoom and little mini teaching days and things like that. And people can get in touch with our ministry. We have a website, mbm-ministry, mbm-ministries.org. That's mbm-ministries.org. And our wonderful administrator Rachel will always help people if they want to get in touch with us or come to one of our events. And I've been doing audio podcasts lately, one called Rest for the Heart and one called Hope for the Heart, because we want to be hope spreaders. We really do. And I think another thing about the book is people say it's given them a lot of hope. It's given them a sense, yes, if God can use us, then yes, he can use me too. And that's what we want.
Don't you think?
God never excludes.
Don't you think, I'll have this to Tracy, don't you think that when you have a book that goes through, a lot of Christians in my past, it's always been about, we can't say that, and it's got to be all this lovey-jubbly stuff, but actually, life's not like that. And when you hear the good and the bad and the outcome and what God has done through the bad, that it's far better to be truthful about the good and the bad, because that's where people find their hope.
Yes, yeah. And we are very ordinary people, and the Lord began to develop a prophetic edge in me after I joined Marilyn. And so sometimes I have words and pictures for people. But although they can be accurate many times, there's other times when I've shared things that with hindsight have been quite funny. And then, for example, like once I had a really beautiful picture of a patchwork quilt. And God was weaving all the pieces together to make a beautiful quilt. And the darker patches were being woven into the bright patches. And it was symbolic of someone who had gone through dark and difficult times. But he was weaving those times into a whole beautiful life within them. And so a person responded to that and was really encouraged. But I really like the idea of this picture and its message. And unfortunately, I then got into a pattern of sharing words about things that were patchwork, and only the first one was correct. I think a little later I had one about a vase smashed into the ground, and it was becoming a patchwork vase. And Marilyn said to me in the way that only Marilyn can, "Trace, I've never heard of a patchwork vase in my life." And I realised then that I was making a pattern out of something, and only the first was right. And they're all weak, we all make mistakes.
Yeah, but we learn by mistakes, don't we? That's the point.
Yes.
We learn by them.
And that in the book.
So
we must never think of mistakes as being, failure is something we can learn from. We might say, oh, I've failed at this, I haven't managed. But that's always another opportunity to try again. Not to say, oh, I am a failure, but, look, okay, I did that bit wrong, but we can start again. Jesus loves to give us new beginnings.
Well, we're in a race, aren't we? And I often think of the race as going over hurdles. And if we fall flat on our face, just get back up again and jump over the next hurdle. I don't think there's no failure really, is there? In our faith, in the book of faith, there's no failure. It's just learning and using it to help us to go further, isn't it?
Yes, it really is. That's right. Because there's no condemnation in Christ. That's the thing. So mistakes are not a crime for him.
I think it's all just a part and part of growing, isn't it, in our faith and trusting. So can you share with us a little bit how we can get your book? It's on Amazon, I know, isn't it? You can get the book on Amazon.
Certainly is on Amazon, like most things, yes.
Yes. And
yes, the book is available from many different sources. If you do happen to have a Christian bookshop in your locality, do look for the book there when lockdown is over, because it's important to support the Christian bookshops. You can get it from us in MBM by looking on the website www.mbm-ministries.org. And so you can look for us. You can get it from Amazon. You can get it from Eden and various other places. A Beautiful Tapestry. Because of the name, it does come up in a section of Amazon's books that are about tapestry making. I was a bit concerned about that at the beginning, but then I realised it was quite an advantage. Because if people were looking for books on needlework and that, and then they found a book about God, it's quite an exciting thing to have that in the middle.
But I think also if they looked on Amazon and couldn't find it there, and they put in Tracy Williamson, that's Tracy without an E, and then Williamson, you'd see a lot of her other books. There's some wonderful books that she's written, a lot about hearing God and learning to hear his voice, but the Beautiful Tapestry book will be there listed too.
Hasn't Tracy written about 8 books? Quite a few, isn't it?
How many have you written, Trace?
Yes, it's 8 books. The previous book, thinking thinking about what we were sharing earlier, what Marilyn was sharing about God's Father's love. I wrote a previous book with Authentic called The Father's Kiss, which is all about how we can come to know him and actually experience his tender father love, even if we haven't experienced that love from our earthly parents. And amazingly, we had some really staggering testimonies as people read that book, including a lady who had had cataracts in both eyes and was due to have an operation for them. And as she read The Father's Kiss, God started to do a deep healing work in her heart from childhood hurts. And then she went for the consultation prior to the operation for her cataracts. The consultant said a really strange thing. Both cataracts have gone. I can't understand it. And she knew it was because God had been restoring her inner sight to see herself truly as a beloved child of God. And somehow out of that, healing had flowed through to her physical eyes as well. So that was staggering.
It's amazing how our emotional life and the things that are going in our hearts do affect us physically. We can't separate our innermost being from our physical lives, you know. It's incredible. So with the breakthrough she had in a healing breakthrough to do with her father, this lady obviously experienced some kind of deep physical healing too.
Our time is just going, but I wondered, Marilyn, if you could give a word of hope for the listeners, especially in this lockdown. And I think what you said about the lockdown is very true. How when we're having to stay in our homes, apart from exercise or going to the shop, and you're on your own, you're left with all your sort of worries and your fears, and it kind of hits you a bit. So I wanted just to share how we can combat that fear. and
yes, well, I'll say a little and then Trace might. I think one of the key things really is concentrating on what God is like. And there's so much, misery and deep grief in the nation at the moment. A heavy-hearted nation we are. And God wants us, it says in Philippians, to concentrate on things that are true and lovely and noble. It's what we focus on that will shape our perspectives. And so, you know, in Psalm 27 it talks about gazing on the beauty of the Lord, on the wonderful things that he wants to do for people, on his gentleness, on his power and strength, on his willingness. And then the other thing in in Isaiah 40, it talks about waiting on the Lord, but not just waiting, it means confidently expecting things from him. It's saying, right, Lord, everything seems a mess, but you're in control, you know what to do, and it's focusing our hearts on the things that he really does want to undertake for us, you know, and Psalm 91, a psalm of great protection. And we can say to him, you know, I mean, if Trace goes out for a walk on her own, I might think, oh gosh, she's late, what's happened to her, whatever's the matter. But then I could look at the psalm and where it says that he will give his angels charge concerning us to guard us in our ways. So I should say, okay, Lord, I know that you're looking after dear Trace. Instead of focusing on the negative, I can focus on the fact that God cares so much for Trace that he's sending his angels alongside us and alongside her. So it's what we're focusing on. And what do you think, Trace, about hope? How do you think we can have hope?
I think, to me, I feel that God has written the message of hope everywhere. And the clouds mass over the sky. And it seems a really dim and gloomy day, and it may pour with rain. But then after a little while, or even a long while, the clouds will break apart and the sun will come out. And in the autumn the trees lose their leaves, and they're bare and stark. But then in the spring the buds come on the trees, a new life begins. And I think the wonderful thing about God, Jesus even put it into words. He said about himself and the death that he was facing, "You will weep at night, but joy will come in the morning." And I think that's the message we'd love to give, that now may have been a time of weeping. It may have been a time of struggle. It may really be personal struggle for some of you listening now. But God is going to turn that struggle around, and he is with you right now, in the midst of it. He is growing things in your heart, a new level of faith, and trust in him. And he will bring the spring. He will bring the sunshine. Hope will prevail over all that's happening. So let him comfort you in this time and speak to you with assurance in your heart, because you are his beloved friend and child. And he really wants to speak that peace to you right now, whatever is going on in your life. Okay.
Well, thank you very much, both Tracy and Marilyn. And I know that your book, Beautiful Tapestry, will speak into the hearts and lives of many people. And it's been a pleasure to have listened and shared with you this today, because you're not, it says two ordinary women and one amazing God. I think you're amazing women serving an amazing God. So thank you both very much for joining me, and it's been a wonderful hour with you. So God bless you and keep you, and I know that your book will be used greatly. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. We've loved being with you.
Thank you very much indeed. Bye-bye. God bless you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.